And Sue Luft is our final speaker this afternoon.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair. My speaker slip was turned with someone else, must have stuck together. Anyway, my name is Sue Luft. I have a small vineyard in the rural El Pomar area east of Templeton. We have hosted a number of nonprofit educational seminars and fundraisers on our property for which we receive no compensation. We live on a 10-acre residential rural parcel on a paved county road. The events we have hosted include an oak restoration seminar for the Central Coast Vineyard team, an irrigation seminar, a bird control good neighbor seminar for the independent grape growers of Paso Robles area, and we're on the annual solar home tour. Attendance at the seminars has exceeded 50 people in some cases. Since parking within the fenced area of our property is limited due to our vineyard, we utilize the road right-of-way for parking. This right-of-way is relatively flat and has good line of sight distance. It's also used for parking vehicles for vineyard workers, for the neighbors, for grape transport vehicles, sand and gravel transfer trucks that serve our neighbors, and by the county mower when the equipment's in the area. The lecture portion of the seminars take place in our shop, which was permitted construction in 2003, therefore it's a new building. The building is approximately 180 feet from the property line and does not have a permit for assembly occupancy. As you can tell from the description, we cannot meet the site design standards in the proposed draft ordinance. Although the current draft is contradictory as to whether these standards apply to events of under 50 people, we certainly would not be able to host over 50 people under this proposal. It would be a shame to not have a nonprofit venue like this available, since we are relatively central for most vineyard folks. I've followed the Events Ordinance for several years. I've come to realize the intent of the ordinance is still unclear. The ordinance needs to be greatly simplified and made workable. I recognize the need to protect agricultural land and the need for our local food supply. I also realize that weddings and other events have become part of the tourist draw in our county. I live in an area with several event venues and wineries nearby, and I enjoy taking advantage of these opportunities, while I am aware of their potential impacts. The current winery ordinance should be used as a starting point for a redrafted ordinance. Nonprofit free admission events should continue to be exempt, since no one will likely host more than a handful of such events in a year. We need to seek a compromise that allows for a reasonable number of events to continue, while addressing the legitimate concerns of the neighbors and minimizing the impacts on ag land and on our natural environment. I ask that your commission send this ordinance back to the Board of Supervisors for guidance, policy, and direction. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Luft. That does conclude our public speaker portion of this hearing, so I'm going to close public comment and bring it back to staff to see if there's any brief response you had to any specific comments today, or whether you'd just like the commission to take it from here.
We're just looking, Karen, I'm just looking through any questions that came up that weren't answered. Possibly the equestrian events, that is something that needs to be addressed and has not been answered. There's a shift statewide on equestrian and what constitutes agriculture. But really, I have no other comment.
Okay. Seeing no more comments from staff, I'll bring it back to the commission. We are 20 minutes into our lunch break, but I do sense that there is some benefit to be had by continuity of the sort of concluding this conversation here today. So I guess I'll begin by asking commissioners how you feel about working another 20 or even 30 minutes or so into our lunch break. Is that desirable?
Yeah.
I'm okay with that.
Folks, nobody has a pressing appointment they need to make? Okay.
I'd like the opportunity to finish up.
Right. So I think at this point I'm going to open it up to commissioners for just general comments to the testimony we've heard today. And I would like to start with the commissioner from District 2, since she is the one remaining commissioner who did serve on the subcommittee so ingloriously for so many months. So Commissioner Wyatt, your thoughts?
Thanks. Thank you again all for coming today. Is the mic's on here? I just have several questions on this and also a few general comments. And first of all, I'd like to start by reminding people that this is a draft which is a work in progress, and there were still a lot of holes in the draft and questions. So I at least had no intention of looking at this as a final product today. I had intended for us to kind of follow up on the big question, the big issue, which we recognized is the possibility of the prohibition of non-ag related events on ag lands. And I was hoping we could follow up on that with some discussion, but I see by the numbers here that discussion on that is going to be difficult given the time, if not the numbers, both. So I don't know, I have a sense that my colleagues up here are not going to want to have too much of a discussion on that, given the rather clear direction from most people here today of wanting to do something else with this draft. I'd just like to again say how frustrating this process has been. We've heard so many people come up today with issues that I thought we had dealt with or that have been unclear. So I'd like to apologize that somehow this process has again failed us, that I think most of us don't know what we're talking about, because there have been different drafts and they haven't been well enough organized. And at least I'm hearing several people here talk about things that we intended to handle, particularly the nonprofit and H-designated properties. I think the intent here was pretty clear to allow some of that, but as many people have pointed out, there are some apparent sort of inherent inconsistencies there because they do have impacts having events in those places. I just wanted to read the list of intents that I've heard during the process of several meetings on this, just to give us some reference point, because they've been brought up. So I've put together a laundry list of the intents that I've heard over the several hearings on this matter. We wanted to update the 1980-ish Events Ordinance. We wanted to simplify the ordinance. We want to implement Ag Policy 6. We want to protect and support active agricultural production. We want to protect existing rural communities. We want to protect rural character. We want to avoid infringement upon private family use and enjoyment of property. We want to allow public use of historic structures. We want to protect ability of nonprofits to have fundraising events. We want to allow educational opportunities. We want to make regulations that are enforceable. We want to promote tourism and the local economy. We want to protect the public health, safety, and welfare. And I will note, out of that laundry list of about 10 intents, there's a pretty uniform consensus on all of those. The one intent that was left off of my list, because there has not been consensus on and has been brought up several times here, is the intent to make the new events ordinance conform with the existing winery ordinance. And that's been brought up here several times, the question of why we're not doing that and whether that should be a goal of this new, more general events ordinance to be consistent with existing winery ordinance. And there have been arguments on both sides of that. And we've seen here today the chart of how many new winery permits have been issued. And I'd just like to remind us that that's not a problem in itself, and I don't think anybody's arguing that's a bad thing. At least I wouldn't, and I'm not. But what the suggestion is being made is that that's a trend that we need to be looking at. And as planners here, it's not our job to say good or bad, but it's our job to look at the trends. And as we see the trends, if we think ahead 20 years, what we can reasonably foresee as a trend is an increased number of impacts from events in rural areas. So it has been our intent to weigh these different intents, and as you notice, they're at conflict. So I'd like us somehow to be able to proceed with this, but I'm hearing a general consensus from most people in the room that it may be prudent to send this to the supervisors for some clarification of intent, or some maybe kind of preferential order of the intents. So I have lots of questions for staff, lots of clarifications that could be made, but given a general guess that that's the direction we're going to go, I'll just maybe stop now and listen to my colleagues here.